The membership types it. Leslie mentioned, she talked about the incentive program, which is a program under which new members pay only a third of the cost share, their normal cost share the first year, 2/3 the second year, and then the third year. And that only applies to institutions of a certain size because there's a minimum cost share for CRL institutions below which you can't go, which I think is $1,200 a year. So some of the newer institutions came in under that. I'm sure the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame people skated in under that one. So we've changed the order of presentation this year. Normally I talk after the budget has been proposed and discussed and approved. I thought it would be fairer, though, or it made a little more sense if I spoke before we present the budget. It seemed to be unfair to ask you to approve a budget for next year when you don't know, before hearing about where we're going and what we're going to do with the resources. So I'm going to the three parts of my report. The first, what we've done in fiscal year 2012, where we've been, what we're going to do in fiscal year 2013, which begins July 1st, and what are the challenges and issues that we face beyond 2013, at least from the vantage point that we have now at this point. We are in transition in fiscal year 2012. We were awarded funding from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation about 3 years ago to put in motion a shift of CRL activities, operations, or really a transformation of CRL operations, activities, and resources from a focus solely on building a centralized shared collection of materials to building a centralized shared collection of materials and supporting the strategic cooperative development of collections and resources and strategic management of collections among our member institutions, by our member institutions. The idea for the GRN, what we call the GRN 2012 plan that was funded by Mellon, was that CRL needed to be not just focused on bringing things into its building in Hyde Park, but into supporting work being done at the CRL libraries, CRL member institutions, to develop strategically and rationally and in an informed manner collections that would support advanced research and teaching. This transformation began a couple years ago, and this year was the kind of the capstone year for it. Where the investment goes, essentially, CRL funding goes into three major areas: collection services, which are interlibrary loan, document delivery, management of collections, management and administration, which is fundraising, human resources, accounting, that kinds of things, financial management, and then collection development. Collection development, by far the largest part of our budget, the largest part of what you're investing in through CRL. About 54% of our budget in fiscal year 2012 has gone into the collection development, and that includes the staffing for acquisitions and development of collections, and as well as the money we spend acquiring collections and acquiring materials and digitizing materials. So in terms of CRL operations, there are really four areas that we operate in, or four big factors. The facilities. Yeah, we do have a building, and we do have some serious physical bricks and mortar infrastructure. The building in Hyde Park holds about 5 million volume equivalents of the CRL collections. This year we invested a major amount of money in upgrades of the building, in upgrade of the roof. We have a very good roof, but there were imperfections in the roof as installed back when the building was built, back in the 1980s. And so those we basically got fixed this year. We upgraded the HVAC system. We were kind of straining the capabilities or straining the capacity of the HVAC system that was installed in the building early on. They were really undersized systems. They were great for people, not so great for books. So but we ran them at top speed, and so we're burning out condensers every year, and all kinds of things were happening to it. But we were able to maintain very good collections environment. We were able to maintain, for the most part, is it 6 degrees and about 50 relative humidity for the collection. So essentially cool temperatures in storage. That HVAC system was upgraded this year, and it's now a smarter system, and now has much more in the way of computer sensors in the various controls, so that we have much better control of the HVAC in the building. We have upgraded the fire and security systems as well in the building. Those things were all aging and so needed to be restored. So this was all possible because we had accumulated funds over the past years. We had set aside funds for the depreciation of the building. And so that was all able to be done. It was also able to be done because we were able to take advantage of the relatively favorable buyer's position in a really bad labor market, or a really bad service market, service economy. So we were able to get, in fact, Don Dyer and his people, Don, who's head of facilities and membership at CRL, was able to, through a bidding process, bring in these improvements at least 30% less than what we had budgeted for them, that we had expected to pay for them. So that was brilliant work. We're also digital infrastructure. Patricia Shaw and the system staff put in place this year a contact information system. And some of you, mostly, probably all of you, have had some contact somehow or other with our contact information system, which is the point of our contact information system, is to have contact with you. We find that CRL is a community of communities of interest, and we depend a great deal on the expertise, the knowledge, and the understanding of people in your institutions. We believed that if we're trying to support people doing collection development, collection management, making collection decisions in your institutions, we need to have a better sense of who these people are. So the collection, or the content information system, is a system that we brought online, that Patricia and her people brought online, that includes a profile of each member institution and information on the particular people at that institution that are important: the interlibrary loan contact, the person in charge of collection development, the library director, and others. It's a kind of a profile of the institution. It's been very useful for us. Patricia asked me to encourage people to keep their profile up to date, and we'll remind you and ask you to do that once a year when we have the membership renewal. So Access Services is serving the collections to the researchers. We continue to do a great deal of interlibrary loan and standard document delivery of articles. What we've done a lot more of lately is on-demand digitization of collections. And this particular one is this is the voice of the Board of Temperance, Prohibition, and Public Morals of the Methodist Episcopal Church, April 1925. It's a newspaper that was digitized for a scholar working at one of the institutions. We've done a fair amount of this year. I think Amy Wood and her people said that we're about 725,000 pages at this time of year, and probably close to 800,000, 850,000 pages on-demand digitization. What's happening as a result of this is that we're seeing more access of CRL collections on the web. When something's digitized for a researcher, it's posted to our web servers, and people at CRL libraries get access to it through the catalog records. And we're finding that more and more people that are going, they're requesting something a second time and third time, and those people now are being served by the web. So the use of CRL library, of the CRL collection by people in your institution is not just can't just be measured in the number of interlibrary loans that are transacted every year, or the number of document deliveries. We're keeping track of the downloads of these PDFs from the web, and so we have pretty good information on how that, and that's increasing tremendously. We've seen, I think, a 200% increase over that year after year for the last couple of years. So we have actually joined and begun to contribute to Borrow Direct this year as well. So CRL now is actually lending to institutions in the Borrow Direct network. So we've been working hard on making the collections more discoverable, more visible, and more usable. And we've seen actually striking increases of use by institutions like Washington University, University of Florida, University of California, Irvine this year. We've also had our records and digital files crawled by Summon. And so those of you available through Summon, we are in the queue at Primo, we are told. And I believe by EBSCO, we've at least given them the protocol to crawl our collections. So if your library uses those Primo, Summon, or EBSCO services, then there should be more visibility of CRL collections. Acquisitions and collection development has been the area where we've had probably the largest change in the last year or so. We do continue to acquire microfilm collections this year. CRL acquired, and these were nominated and voted on by people at CRL libraries. The Central American Archives, which is the most extensive archive of the Spanish-speaking world in Latin America and Central America from 1544 to 1821. The CIS Congressional Bills and Resolutions, a large collection of late Soviet and transitional Soviet press, and people from Wisconsin don't get too excited, the Cheese Reporter, which is the main dairy trade publication of the 20th century. So the Cheese Reporter is now available. So. In addition to that, a number of those communities of interest that are working under the CRL umbrella have been busy out there identifying important at-risk materials, primary materials in the world for digitization or microfilming. This year, the Cooperative Africana Microform Project, or the CAMP, which is no longer taking the word microform out of their name because they now digitize. But this year, they microfilmed SIGI and the two political leftist political publications from Senegal from the 1970s. Those are entitled SIGI and Taxal. The Latin American group microfilmed Davat, which was the South Asian microform project, Microform Davat, which is a newspaper from the Indira Gandhi regime, during the Indira Gandhi regime in India. And the Middle East group microfilmed Iraqi newspapers published since the invasion, since 2003. So a very rich collection of Iraqi news from that period. Those have all been done by these communities of interest that operate under the CRL umbrella. Those collections are available at all CRL libraries, and those have been cataloged and are now available through the catalog. These are the kinds of things that our friends and allies in the various universities, many of them in the major research universities in the U.S. and Canada, do. They are extremely knowledgeable about the important documentation of what's going on in the parts of the world that they focus on. They're also very energetic, and they get things done. They finance and execute these projects, these microfilming projects and digitization projects. There's also an archives digitization project going on in, James, is it Uganda? Okay, now under the auspices of the CAMP group, the Africana group. So these are the little communities of interest that are always operating under the CRL umbrella. We don't talk about them that much, but they really are responsible for getting to CRL some extraordinary collections. Those groups have begun some of these groups have begun also to license foreign language databases. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So, the Redex World Newspaper Archive, which is our effort in partnership with Redex to systematically digitize the foreign newspapers in CRL's collections and in the collections of a number of the major CRL libraries like UCLA, University of Texas, University of Florida, UC Berkeley, University of Illinois, University of Washington, a number of others. This has been an effort that we started about 4 or 5 years ago to give the CRL libraries some clout with the vendors, with the aggregators. This was an effort that brought together the CRL libraries to collectively deal with, in this case, REDX, to undertake a systematic digitization of a body of material that wouldn't have been done otherwise. It probably wouldn't have been done by a commercial firm like REDX if left to their own devices. It's an endeavor that there was just not enough money in, they say, worldwide, in terms of the worldwide market, but it was an endeavor that is certainly true to CRL's mission. And we're very pleased to announce that the second Latin American newspapers module has come online earlier this year, and that includes about 1.2 million pages of new Latin American newspapers that have been digitized from these collections. We're working hard on a module on Slavic and Eastern European newspapers. These have all been digitized, but the people at REDX have been slow to crack the Cyrillic OCR challenge. Sounds like a really tough challenge to me, but we expect that module to come online later this year. So we're very grateful to the CRL libraries who have contributed and who have signed on as charter participants in this endeavor, and so that makes this whole project possible. We have begun this year to do more licensing of databases. We've been focusing on major electronic databases that support the humanities and social sciences. This activity began in a couple of the global resources projects, the French language project and the German language project. We started licensing foreign language databases for their own purposes, and basically, since we're the CRL is the host for those projects, we actually did the licensing and hold the contracts and all that. There's had been a lot of interest from CRL libraries expressed in having access to some of the large databases that are very expensive but very specialized. These are databases that normally another consortium, normally the buying consortiums don't normally have enough takers to put together a market for those databases. We engaged, starting in September, Ann Okerson, formerly of Yale University, as an advisor to us to help us figure out what should be our electronic strategy, or what should be our strategy in regards to licensing of electronic materials. As I mentioned, this is an area where there's a lot of activity already. There are a number of consortia that aggregate, that basically buy for people, but what we found was that even the consortia heads that we spoke with that do this kind of work said there really needs to be a lot more work done in the major humanities and social science databases, that a lot of the consortia are very occupied with the journal and ebook licensing issues, and those kinds of things are taking up time. There needed to be more scrutiny. We found that was very true. I think there's something very wrong with the way libraries get access to major databases, particularly major primary databases. There's almost no transparency in this market. People are buying things before these things are created. People are buying things for discounts, which are discounts off of prices that have not been tested and proven in the market. So I think there's a lot of work that we can do. We expect to do that work in tandem or in cooperation with the existing consortia that many of you work with, consortia like CIC, ACERL, Lyrasis, and those, because we don't think there's any room for redundancy in this economy. So we don't want to have, we would like to avoid any type of not only redundancy or competition, but even the perception of redundancy or competition in this arena. And we think we can do this. Ann Okerson has been very useful in helping us do this, and set up meetings with the heads of the CIC, Lyrasis, Colorado Alliance, and we also met in December with the head of the Canadian Research Knowledge Network, national Canadian licensing effort, and JISC Collections, which is the UK national JISC, national collections licensing operation. We are now working in partnership with them. We are now sharing information about what databases are coming up. We're sharing information about terms. We're sharing information about issues. CRL is doing a fair amount of analysis of those databases. And this is from the CRL Global Resources Forum. This is our review of the Times of India. We found that a lot of times these databases would go on sale very quickly after they were announced and well before they were actually produced. And so this happened about a year ago with the Times of India ProQuest product. The product was announced. The marketing people were on the doorsteps of a lot of your libraries pushing it, and there was no real information except what the vendor gave out about it. And so we dug much further into it. And so I recommend this analysis. This was put together by James Simon and Virginia Kerr, and a number of people at CRL, of the Times of India, what's actually in that database, where that content came from, what kinds of issues there are going to be with licensing of that kind of thing. We did establish a couple of years ago a partnership with the Charleston Advisor, which you all have access to online, all the people at your institutions, and that is a very good source of reviews, of analysis of databases and electronic resources. Unfortunately, those reviews come out well after the product is already in the market, and in many cases, well after the product has really been sold to about 30 or 40 ARL libraries and 30 or 40 other libraries. These reviews in the Global Resources Forum part of our web these reviews happen when the database gets announced. If it's something of interest to CRL or the CRL library, these reviews go up very quickly after that. And we continue to add to them as we learn about the resource. We think, and we're confident actually that these are going to provide a good bit more transparency in the market. We think this is going to provide your people, your collection development people, a good bit more information upon which to make a decision about not only whether to acquire something, but how much to pay for it, what kinds of issues you want to take up in the licenses, those kinds of things. So we are working. The whole purpose of this is to get us leverage with the dealers, with the vendors, the commercial producers of these. Even in their primary sources, not everything is going to be digitized for open access. Not everything is going to be digitized by us. So we're going to have to deal with hostile characters out there. And so the more we can work together, the better it's going to be for all of us. We think now with CRL's membership being 265 institutions, as Leslie mentioned, that we do have a fairly large size population for us to support in negotiations with these organizations. We're working with NERL. We've worked at NERL in the past very successfully, sharing information again about databases, about offers, and working together to see how many people actually want to acquire those databases. We'll work with them in the future, and as I said, we're working with closely, we're comparing notes and talking constantly with the Lyrasis, CIC, and the others, and the JISC and the Canadian Research Knowledge Network people. We don't want to be a buying club, essentially. I mean, there are plenty of buying clubs out there. We don't think that price is necessarily the last word and the major factor, or it's certainly not the only factor in the acquisition of databases. We think there are a lot of other issues: archiving of the content, the integrity of the content, the continued presence of the content, the authoritativeness of the content, those kinds of things that need to be worked through. And I think to have any impact on those elements, on those aspects of electronic publishing, we have to be working very closely with the actual acquisition activity, with the purchase activity, because that is the leverage that our libraries have with the publishers in the end. In the end, it's the only leverage that you have with the publishers. So we are working very closely with the major licensing operation, but we don't think we don't want to be merely a buying club. Having said that, we have actually a pretty good offer from the negotiated, and Okerson negotiated a very good offer for the Gale 19th Century Collections Online. Again, look at the information on the website. There's a good bit of information on this. Virginia Kerr and others at CRL scrutinized what's there, held the people at Gale's feet to the fire about what's really there, what's not going to be there, what percentage of this is going to be open access, is already available in open access, what percentage is already available in microfilm, that kind of thing. Those are the kind of questions that have been asked. So there's been a fair amount of that information incorporated in the reviews on the web. You also notice there's a feedback button on there, so don't be afraid to press it and to provide your input on these. If you think this is a real dog of a database, let us know. If you have secret information via WikiLeaks about what's happening on this thing, let us know. But we are doing more in the way of really looking at under the hood of the electronic resources. This odd-looking diagram is from a report we did last year for the Library of Congress on the production of electronic news. The report was prompted by the gravitation or the migration of the news publishers from paper to the web, and the concerns that we're essentially not preserving it. We're in the second decade of where the web has been the major venue for news dissemination, and we're in the second decade of when we're not archiving it. So this is a perilous situation, we believe. We thought to be able to evolve a realistic preservation strategy for electronic news, we really needed to know more about how it's produced, how it's sourced, how it's produced, and how it's distributed. This is the diagram from the report on the standard ways of distributing news in the newspaper realm. Content goes from the local publishers at top to the printers. They winds up in paper copies. They're read by faceless individuals. Paper copies also go to the micro publishers on the upper right, and then they get down into libraries. Paper copies also go directly to libraries, but our graphic designer didn't comprehend that part of it. This kind of mapping we applied to the whole process of electronic publication of news as well. So we mapped how the news content gets from the editorial room to the Latin American newsstand or ProQuest newsstand product. How it gets from there to how it gets from the newsroom to LexisNexis, how it gets from the newsroom to the web. We think that the way this content is managed and processed is going to lead to a sensible strategy on preservation of news. Technical services and metadata. We have, I mentioned before, we have, Summon has indexed our collections. We've also finished began and finished a cataloging project this year of all of the official gazettes in the CRL collections have all been cataloged. That's about 582 records. It's about 161 different countries that these gazettes are. These gazettes are kind of like newspapers, but they have a lot more data. They're where the major laws of a lot of countries are published first. They're where trade statistics show up. And they really start being produced from in the, most of them really start being produced in the 1800s. And so there's an enormous amount of financial, economic, population, and political data in those things. So now they're cataloged. Amy Wood and her team have also, though, been undertaking a big shift from cataloging to metadata harvesting and analysis. They have, with funding from the IMLS, Amy and her crew are aggregating very fine issue-level metadata from newspaper collections at places like the Library of Congress and the American Antiquarian Society. This is in an effort to get more granular information about what news collections are actually out there to support the planning of the print archiving, the archiving of these. Amy has been tremendously successful in figuring out how to harvest metadata on the content of digital collections from various and print collections from a number of places. We are also working. I'll talk a little bit more about the agriculture project, where Amy's also collecting, holding this information on agricultural cereals. But there has been a fundamental change in CRL technical services, where people have moved from what was predominantly a cataloging operation, which cataloged everything that came in, and to an operation that catalogs everything that comes in, but also is aggregating a lot of metadata for purposes of print archiving and our analysis of databases, those kinds of things. Certification is another thing that's going on in CRL Technical Services. We just CRL just certified the Chronopolis repository at the University of California, San Diego Supercomputing Center. We thought that was a very interesting model. It's very different from Clocks and Portico in that it's a service that essentially just holds and maintains permanently digital content. It doesn't make that content available. There are no terms to make it available. It's essentially held in trust for the operations like ICPSR that they archive for. Another different model, Scholars Portal, is now in the process of going through a CRL audit to be a trustworthy digital repository. Scholars Portal is the operation based at the University of Toronto that hosts all the licensed content, all the digital content licensed by Canadian universities. So it's an enormous repository of information. Again, it's very unlike Portico and Clocks because this is holding licensed content with the rights to preserve that content long term. So we thought it'd be interesting to have information up about that, and we will when we get this report done. And so you can see what the different types of repositories that are coming online are, and what the choices you're going to have are as time goes on. And we are prompting discoverability through webinars and resources for librarians and end users. This is from our newsletter on documenting on Middle East studies. The Focus newsletter contains information about CRL collections, but also the collections that are out there, either on the web or in the collections of the CRL member libraries. This one focused on Middle East. This report came out of a webinar at which Roberta Doherty at the University of Texas wrote a remarkable presentation about the Arab Spring web and the documentation of the Arab Spring that existed on the web. So I recommend that. That webinar was archived on YouTube, and you can get to that through our website. Yes, you can get to the newsletter as well. So next year, the coming year, finally, fiscal year 2013, all this change that I described as happening in 2012 and before puts great stress on the CRL budget. Therefore, we are willing to incur a deficit. As you'll see in the proposed budget for next year, we're proposing a deficit budget, a very small deficit, but a deficit nonetheless. In the last 3 years, we proposed a deficit, and we did better. We actually came in the black. But we think that there is need now to draw on the CRL reserve because we think that the things that we've started doing are important things to do, and we'd like to continue to do them. So I'm happy to say that the IMLS has supported us in print archiving with 2 major grants that happened in 2011. And those are 2 major national leadership grants. They've helped a great deal. I'm happy to announce that in December we were notified the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation granted us a grant of $1,005,000 for the next 2 years to help CRL enlarge its support of collection development, to expand Global Resources Forum and the activities that we've been doing in the last couple of years that support the decisions about collection investment and collection management in your institutions. That grant enables us to follow the strategic directions that were established in 2007 for CRL, and to focus on electronic access and supporting of distributed or broadly cooperative collection development and collection management. This will, the purpose of the grant and what we'll be doing is focusing our communities expertise and resources around the systematic and strategic digitization and archiving in tandem of a critical mass of legacy materials in each of four major domains. These are where digitization and continued collection, under this program, digitization and continued collection growth are integrally, inseparably connected with preservation. That we're doing archiving, we're doing print archiving, but we're doing it in tandem with digitization of collections and with continued collection development. So we are not creating time capsules, we want these to be living collections. And these are the four domains. News is the first. That's one where we've been traditionally very active. People know CRL for newspapers. The second one, law and government. Third, history and economics of agriculture. And the fourth, the history of science, technology, and engineering. I'll talk about each of those. News, but in each of these areas, we are systematically identifying critical collections and materials in each of these four domains, in each of these focus areas. The plan is to establish community consensus on the preservation and archiving and digitization of these materials, and to negotiate licenses and partnerships also to obtain access to other critical materials in these domains that are available electronically for CRL libraries. So again, in tandem, archiving, digitization, and electronic access and collection development. Those are all components of these four major global resources programs. Our focus is on primary published serial materials, serial literature, not books or scholarly journals, because there's much work being done there. CRL has always focused on what we call the fundamentals, especially this year, and those are the primary strata of materials that support original scholarly research and exploration and original teaching. There are a number of places that, as I say, do handle the books, the e-books, the secondary collections, but we, again, don't want to be redundant. We think redundancy is death these days. In the area of news, the one where we've been working for some time, we have our strategy in place for getting access to historical foreign newspapers. The World Newspaper Archive we've made a very good start at that. But our strategy will combine the licensing of obtaining for CRL access, or CRL libraries, access to not only historical materials, but the current news as well. Current news databases like Factiva and World News Access and those kinds of things are extremely expensive, but they're also becoming much more important these days for scholars. The pricing of those is mainly for the Wall Street firms and the law firms and those, not for libraries. We think we can do better. We think we can, in fact, we think we have to get some collective bargaining, collective access to these areas. We bring the basic collective force of our membership behind the negotiation of access to current and historical news collections. So we'll be working on that. The reports of the Library of Congress on news preservation convinced us that preservation of electronic news is not going to happen in libraries. It's just not. Looking at these large content management systems operated by the news organizations, by news media like New York Times, Gannett, Clear Channel, Knight Ridder, and those, was a moment of truth for us. We realized these things were so awesome, there's no way we're going to reproduce them or replicate their functionalities. So the strategy for the preservation of news in the future is going to have to be through relationships, creating relationships with the media organizations and the aggregators. That just will have to happen. We're also pursuing we'll continue to pursue systematic digitization through World Newspaper Archive. We've also are now negotiating with 3 major ARL libraries to take legacy collections of newspapers that are being held by the organization, but they would like them to come to rest somewhere else. our plan that we submitted to Mellon Foundation involves us creating a plan for the digitization of all the paper news that's at CRL, as well as these other collections beginning in 2014. These are collections that are, many of them were within copyright, but many of them are not represented in microfilm, so they're not accessible. We just simply have to deal with them, and we're going to have to deal with them on a relatively soon time frame. So 2014 is when we hope to get started on that. Anybody who's had a tour of the CRL building has seen the stacks of newspapers we have on the 4th floor. It's an enormous, marvelous collection, but it needs tending to. In the area of law and government, we have created a partnership with the Law Library Microform Consortium, under which legal primary materials have been digitized, and the steering committee was set up a year ago to guide that digitization. We've now managed to influence the Law Libraries Consortium to digitize a lot more foreign material, a lot more area studies related material, a lot more primary material. And so Virginia Carroll will talk about that tomorrow. Their database is a database only a mother could love or a law librarian could love. That is available for all CRL libraries right now, but we were not seeing a lot of use of it. There are big problems with the database. What there aren't big problems with is the work that Law Libraries Consortium has done in the last 15 or 20 years, which is to preserve an enormous body of very, very important material that is about to disappear from law libraries all over the world. And that's why we're working with them. That's why we formed this partnership, and we hope to continue to build a digitization in combination with print archiving, in combination with access, in partnership with them. We've accomplished quite a bit already. They have digitized our CRL's whole collection of Canadian legislative journals, for one. They've also digitized a very important body of early Haitian law from the Republic of Haiti, a very important body of African law done under the common law, from African common law nations in the continent. And these are the kind of things that, aside from the Haiti, that they probably wouldn't have done without CRL's influence. But we think this is a good partnership. You'll hear more about it tomorrow. If this is successful, this Global Resources Law Partnership will be a template for further CRL collection development in other domains. Together, CRL and the Law Libraries Consortium bring together 500 libraries, 500 academic, independent, public, and law school libraries. That's a lot of expertise. That's a lot of knowledge. That's access to a lot of collections. I think that we can have an enormous impact on the preservation and accessibility of legal and civil society materials. So, agriculture, the third area. This is the primary literature of the history and economics of agriculture. This is material, the kinds of material CRL has a fair amount of. Back when CRL was formed in 1949, a lot of the CRL libraries deposited this material. They're copies of agricultural journals, trade journals relating to food production, that kind of thing, trade materials relating to water, and that kind of thing at CRL. So we have large legacy collections of that. We felt because of that, we also learned that there's a great grassroots, actually there are two major grassroots efforts out there to preserve the literature and to provide access to the literature of agriculture. Those are the U.S. Agricultural Information Network, which is a group of, I think, about 40 or 50 land-grant university libraries that have been, since the 1970s, identifying and microfilming and now digitizing primary literature of American agriculture. There's also the U.S. Agricultural Network Information, the Agricultural Network Information Center, which is headed by the National Agricultural Library, which is dedicated to disseminating information about agriculture, and including historical agriculture, history and economics of agriculture. Our plan is to link the CRL's member interests with the agendas of those organizations, and to build onto these very active digitization efforts, the print archiving efforts, so that some of these physical collections can be retired and managed as economically by CRL and its libraries. Well, that's the newest of the 4 CRL domains, and that's something that you'll hear more about tomorrow as that develops. The 4th, the science, technology, and engineering. We recently announced a partnership with the Linda Hall Library of Science, Engineering, and Technology. This is a variation on our global resources partnership template, but it's an important one. This partnership will build on the rich holdings of print serials in the fields of science, history, and science, technology, and engineering, assembled in CRL and at Linda Hall Library during the past 6 decades. Together, these holdings constitute an enormous premier library of global science, a premier historical library of global science. CRL and Linda Hall will combine under this partnership our human, technical, and financial resources to further develop these collections and to actively promote their visibility and use and to preserve them for future generations of scholars and historians. How does this work? Well, it starts out with that these collections covered by this partnership include the current and back issues of the over 50,000 journal titles acquired and maintained by Linda Hall and CRL. This enlarges the number of journal titles available through CRL to CRL libraries by an order of magnitude. CRL's journals in this area are maybe about 10,000 titles, so this adds about another 40,000 titles to that. Beginning July 1, these will be available through document delivery service. From the paper copies at Linda Hall will be available to CRL libraries. These include print serials from Elsevier, Wiley, Springer, and other publishers, historical serials published by the Russian Academy of Science and other learned societies in Europe, Asia, and the U.S., foreign serials in the field of physics, chemistry, and engineering received through the Library of Congress Cooperative Acquisition Project, and engineering specifications and technical reports and standards, all those kinds of things. These are, not only are these to be made available, but they're under an archive agreement with Linda Hall, that Linda Hall will archive these materials and maintain these collections permanently. If they decide at some point not to maintain them, then CRL has right of first refusal for receiving these collections. So this essentially extends the body of material that your people at your institutions have access to, but also puts in place a fairly good security blanket for the archiving of these materials. Linda Hall, one of the reasons why they're an ideal partner for CRL in this is that they've recently built onto their facility in Kansas City very, very good climate control storage space, which they will, on their own, never fill. This endeavor, again, is not a time capsule. It's not saying that what's there now will stay there only. It's saying CRL and we'll work with Linda Hall to further develop these collections, to create digitization programs based on these collections, drawing from these collections, and so forth. That this is a true collection development partnership, and we're very excited about it. There will be more details about this. Your interlibrary loan people have already been contacted about it. The institutions that are currently have access or getting document delivery service from the Linda Hall collections through rapid interlibrary loan will begin to get that without charge on July 1st. During the course of the year, there will be training for the other CRL libraries on how to get access to these things through RAPID, and CRL will support the document delivery costs on that. RAPID is a very interesting business model. They only penalize the institutions that are providing content to the members. So the charges for this are really essentially Linda Hall's costs on this, that they are the ones that where there's an impact. RAPID has some costs as well to connect everybody, but this will be done fairly quickly. Generally, we do, as I said, we have a committee. We are establishing a joint committee that will guide this effort. Steve Bosch has been appointed the senior program advisor in collections for this effort, And we'll be appointing senior program advisors for collections and the other global resources domains that I talked about before, law and government, certainly law and government and agriculture as well. If Steve will be working next month or so to form the committee and is interested in, we are interested in hearing about volunteers. Anybody is we were looking for people that know absolutely everything about the history of science, technology, and engineering collections. So if you're one of those people, please step up. In general, beyond 2012, CRL is a big tent. It's long been an umbrella under which many interest groups have worked and worked quite successfully to develop collections and to preserve important materials. CRL is an organization whose members support development of a large range of collections in the aggregate as well. Aside from the interest groups, there we do the overall CRL collecting of microform collections and those kinds of things together. These are partnerships. These are not buying clubs, but we are seeing in recent years pressures towards disaggregating, towards saying, well, members can participate in should we allow members to just participate in this part of the collection? Should we invite institutions that are just interested in science and being part of CRL for science? I don't think so. We'd like to resist that, but those would be the things we're talking about tomorrow. It essentially comes down to the difference between the all-in model, if you're talking about in terms of the market, or the global resources model, which is everyone is part of the whole. We've seen some good growth of the CRL membership in the past couple of years, as Leslie pointed out. We've seen growth particularly among smaller universities, college and independent research libraries. You see a number of the City University of New York colleges came in, institutions. This spreads the cost of the burden of CRL investment, or the burden of CRL's activities widely. And it also opens new possibilities for collaboration. What this all means, it means that libraries other than the major research libraries are now sharing the cost of preserving critical materials, critical primary materials for advanced research. This was not something that was done 60 years ago when CRL was founded. It was founded by 10 major research universities. We've seen the diversification of the CRL population. That brings with it, makes it a little harder to keep everybody happy, but on the same hand, by the same token, I think diversity is very good. Encouraging things, it means that more institutions are affirming this is the fundamental responsibility of research libraries to look beyond their own immediate challenges, their own immediate collection needs, to the future of research, to ensure that if a wealth of source materials is available, that a representation of diverse viewpoints and perspectives on events and people survives, and that the integrity of critical resources on our society and on all societies, global societies, are available for future research and teaching. The National Libraries and Archives now are in retrenchment. As you know, federal funding is shrinking. This means that the institutions, the non-federal sector has to step up, and the non-federal sector has indeed stepped up, judging from CRL's growth. The practical outcome of this is a good thing. As Deb will say later, talks about the budget, the 42 CRL libraries this year, cost share will go down beginning of July. Most of these are major institutions. This is because the larger population are holding costs down, are keeping the cost share factor where it is, means that it does benefit. The CRL model works the way it's supposed to work. So we're very happy about that. But there are also some unpredictable and tangible and less tangible outcomes of this. Back last spring, we were visited by the Prosecutor General of Brazil. And the Prosecutor General of Brazil was at CRL, which is kind of an out-of-the-way place, particularly for Brazilians. It was because back in the 70s, one of the groups working under the CRL auspices, the Latin American Microform Project, microformed a very important body of material for the people of Brazil, and that body of material the Brazilian government now wanted to publicize and expose. Apparently CRL had the only copy of this, and what this was a copy of were the transcripts of the secret trials that were happening in Brazil in the 1960s and 70s of dissidents, opposition leaders, and a number of innocent people who were tried and many summarily executed by the military. The transcripts of these secret trials were smuggled out of the courthouse or out of the ministry by the lawyers, by some of the lawyers representing these defendants. And they were taken to a local university where it's a great story, the students who were known for staying up all night, stayed up all night and Xeroxed them. And so the actual documents are part of this microfilm collection that's now at CRL. So this is the kind of thing you want to remember when, that motivates us at CRL, is making, the fact that these kind of materials, which haven't been used in 60 or in 50 years, 40 years, are still around because of the efforts that the people that work under the umbrella of CRL have taken. These are the kinds of things that we are indebted to you for. The goal of our budget next year is to make possible what the commercial sector and the government sector will not do. And so this is what you make possible in your investment in CRL.